So guys, when you actually have particular pieces of evidence, like a particular scene, such as the church scene, and like a particular quote about whatever it is that you're speaking about, it's important to note that these are not arguments in themselves. These are evidence, or this is evidence that you can use within an argument. Now, the way of broadening an idea, all right, so we're going from these basic ideas and we're going to be flipping, all right, and by that we mean broadening the ideas so that we can actually come up with overarching arguments that then these pieces of evidence fit into, okay? Now, I've only written the church scene because I don't want to take too much time writing out specific quotes, but you would actually have, you know, a couple of quotes that you think really clearly show the role that Calpurnia has in helping Scout understand things, all right? And this particular scene is full of them, but you can do that in your own time. So it is important that you do have actual quotes like what we do here, okay? However, in order to flip a piece of evidence and broaden it so that you can use this evidence within an overarching argument, you need to think about what this piece of evidence says in relation to your thesis. So our thesis is talking about how Calpurnia and Aunt Alexandra offer explanations and ultimately clarity. That's how we are saying that the women influence Scout's life. In relation to Calpurnia, particularly with this scene, I would suggest that Calpurnia actually exposes Scout to things that she wouldn't otherwise be exposed to. Now, that exposure actually leads Scouts to question everything that she's seeing, everything that she now associates with Calpurnia, all right? Her congregation, the way that they collect money, why they're collecting money, the way that they worship and the way that they sing hymns. They don't read from hymn books, etc. So this actually creates questions which Calpurnia then responds to, which in essence create understanding for Scout. So my overarching argument would be a refined version of this. And then what happens is this is how you get more sophisticated teal paragraphs, because your overarching argument is talking about that the women actually expose Scout to things in society, and in a specific example of that is Calpurnia and the church. But then you might actually have a secondary piece of evidence that has nothing to do with Calpurnia and the church. You might actually talk about Mrs. DeBose. You know, if you were incorporating other women in the essay, you could talk about another example with Cal. There are countless moments where Calpurnia actually impacts Scout and exposes her to ideas by the way that she actually responds to Scout's questions. All right. In fact, the Mrs. DeBose example is probably not even a good one. Why? Because we are focusing on Aunt Alexandra and Calpurnia. So that's a case, guys, where I've actually just had to remind myself, what am I actually speaking about? I'm focusing on these two characters. You don't want to deviate from that because this is in your thesis. All right. So that's the way that we actually flip a piece of evidence. If I was looking at this second piece of evidence, which is a quote about Aunt Alexandra, I would be thinking about, what does this actually show about Aunt Alexandra? And I would argue the fact that she focuses on the importance of Scout behaving in a certain way reflects her the importance that she places on allowing or encouraging Scout to understand her role in society. Now, even though Scout disagrees with this, at the time, gender roles were very, very significant in society, and the way that she behaved, especially because she has a family legacy to uphold. You know, they were one of the very important families who'd settled there years and years and years and years before, and Aunt Alexandra places a lot of importance on that fact, and the fact that Scout needs to be the woman of the house, because her mother is obviously not in the picture. So again, this is where we are broadening the argument to. Because what you can then do is find another quote about Aunt Alexandra, or something that Aunt Alexandra actually says, to support it again. Just like what we've got up here, where we have piece of evidence here, another piece of evidence that actually links to the idea of exposure to things in society. We've got a quote here, all right? And then we have another piece of evidence that we could potentially use. Now, guys, this is what would appear in the example section of your teal paragraph. You would be analysing this particular quote as well as this particular quote, and that's how you have one whole argument that is extensive. We'll come back in a sec to finish off our arguments.